Art mirrors the human condition.
We uncover its hidden patterns,
Experience human creativity.
elevated by digital analysis.
Welcome to the Academy.
Join the journey.
Welcome to today's Explainer, where we're going to unpack what might just be the absolute ultimate philosophical, psychological thriller. We are diving deep into Albert Camus' 1942 masterpiece, The Stranger. But look, right off the bat, I need to tell you, this isn't your standard true crime breakdown. Not at all. This is a story that completely rewrites the rules of why human beings do what they do. We're going to deconstruct the anatomy of a murder, sure, but we'll be doing it by stepping directly inside a mind that point-blank refuses to play by society's rules. Prepare to question pretty much everything you think you know about human motivation. The benign indifference of the universe. Just let those haunting words from our protagonist, Meursault, sink in for a second. This explainer is essentially a reverse whodunit. We already know exactly who pulls the trigger. There's no mystery there. The absolute mystery is the why. And the answer to that why is hidden right inside this realization, establishing the incredibly dark, atmospheric, and unsettling tone of the narrative we're about to explore.
To even begin to understand this crime, we first have to meet our deeply unconventional protagonist in Part 1, A Life of Indifference, and our unconventional anti-hero.
Okay, so picture this timeline. The whole plot revolves around Meursault. He is a French-Algerian shipping clerk whose life moves in this bizarrely mundane, almost robotic sequence. On day 1, he attends his own mother's funeral, and notably, he sheds absolutely no tears. He displays zero conventional grief, none. By day 4, he is right back to his ordinary routine, casually starting up a romance with a former colleague, Marie. Fast forward just a bit to week 3, he inadvertently gets drawn into a dispute, heads to the beach, and, completely overwhelmed by the intense heat, shoots a man. By month 11, he's sitting in a courtroom facing a trial for his life. It's this incredibly casual, seemingly arbitrary escalation from a quiet funeral to a violent climax that makes his mind so utterly fascinating to dissect. Which brings us to the underlying framework of it all in Part 2, the philosophy of the absurd, and a universe devoid of meaning.
To truly grasp how that violent climax on the beach actually happens, we have to look through the exact psychological lens Meursault uses. And that brings us straight to the concept of the absurd. Camus suggests that as human beings, we're basically hardwired with this frantic, desperate desire for meaning, order, and purpose. We want things to make sense. But when we look out into the universe for answers, what do we get? We're met with total, silent meaninglessness. That conflict between what we want and what the universe actually gives us, that is the absurd. Meursault is the ultimate archetype of the absurd hero. Unlike traditional protagonists going on these grand, heroic quests, he absolutely refuses to invent meaning where it doesn't exist. He just accepts that life has no grand design. He lives purely 100% in the present moment, which, as you'll see, makes him completely alien to everyone else around him.
And that alien perspective dictates everything, leading us to Part 3, driven by the sun, and the primacy of the physical world. This is where Camus does something brilliant. He completely strips away traditional psychological depth. Meursault's decisions, they aren't dictated by complex moral frameworks. He isn't having deep internal monologues wrestling with right and wrong. Instead, his choices are entirely dictated by immediate, raw physical sensations. He's driven by things like the cool relief of the water, physical desire, sudden hunger, and exhaustion. And then there's the sun. In The Stranger, the sun isn't just the weather, it's not just a backdrop, it acts as an antagonistic, almost divine, overpowering force that completely bypasses human reason. So, bring yourself back to the murder itself. Meursault is standing on the beach. The heat is literally blinding. It's oppressive, beating down on him, unbearable. Sweat is stinging his eyes. The heat is intensely driving into his skull. An antagonist draws a knife. The sun catches that steel, flashing right into Meursault's eyes like a physical blow. And in that split second of blinding, overwhelming heat, the trigger is pulled. It's not out of malice. It's not out of some calculated premeditation. The universe itself, through the sheer physical pressure of the sun, dictates this arbitrary, violent action. The physical world just takes complete control. But society can't accept that. Which brings us to Part 4, Society on Trial, and inventing a psychological monster. Suddenly, the chaotic, sweltering heat of the beach just vanishes. We are thrust into the cold, rigid, heavily air-conditioned rationality of the courtroom. And this brilliantly illustrates the clash of two entirely different worlds. On one side, we have Meursault's reality, right? It's dictated by physical sensations, blinding glare, and random chance. But on the other side, we have society's reality. Society is desperate for rational cause and effect. They need premeditation. They need a moral framework. The justice system is facing massive cognitive dissonance here. Think about it. A court of law cannot possibly accept that a man was killed arbitrarily just because the weather was hot. No way. So to protect their own comfortable worldview, they literally have to invent a psychological monster.
Which leads to this incredibly dark, almost comical irony of how the prosecution actually builds its case against him. Step 1. The prosecution effectively ignores the actual murder. Seriously. Instead, they fixate entirely on the fact that Meursault didn't cry at his mother's funeral. He is essentially put on trial for having improper funeral etiquette. Step 2. They note his radical honesty. He flat out refuses to fake conventional remorse just to save his own skin. He won't play the game. Which naturally leads to step 3. They condemn him to death. Because when you look closely, his true crime isn't taking a life. His true crime is threatening the comforting illusions that society absolutely relies on to function.
And this sets the stage for our final act, Part 5, the ultimate rebellion and the climax of consciousness. So up until this point, Meursault has been incredibly passive. He just sort of lets life happen to him. But as he awaits execution in his prison cell, everything changes. A prison chaplain comes to visit, practically begging him to turn to God, to find some spiritual salvation before the guillotine falls. And for the very first time in the entire story, Meursault erupts. I mean, he just snaps. He violently rejects the chaplain's religious comforts and what he sees as the completely false hope of an afterlife. This is a massive turning point. Screaming at that chaplain becomes his act of ultimate clarity and rebellion. Meursault is finally taking full, uncompromising ownership of his own finite existence. And it leads to this profoundly beautiful, awe-inspiring realization. Facing the absolute certainty of the guillotine, all of his anger just washes away. He opens his heart to the benign indifference of the universe. He realizes that despite everything, despite the trial, the absurdity, the impending execution, he has been happy. And he finds this strange, lasting peace in the understanding that there is no grand design. The universe doesn't care, and the only absolute truth in this life is death. Which brings us to the final thought I really want to leave you with today. Meursault went to his grave because he absolutely refused to lie. He refused to pretend to feel things he didn't feel, and he refused to subscribe to the illusions of meaning that the rest of the world so desperately clings to. So, I have to ask you, are you just playing the societal game? What comforting illusions are you relying on right now to avoid facing the silent, meaningless reality of the universe? It is a terrifying thought for sure, but as Camus shows us, accepting it might just be the very first step to truly being free. Thanks so much for joining me for this explainer, and I'll see you in the next one.
Love the masterpiece? Subscribe for more.